A decision on improving the electoral system of the Hong Kong Special Administrative Region was passed by the National People's Congress, which is responsible for electing the chief executive, would be drastically adjusted. The size of the election committee would be increased from 1,200 to 1,500, and the Legislative Council from 70 to 90 seats. The currently half of the 70 seats which were directly elected would be shrunk with extra seats elected by the election committee. A new vetting mechanism would also be created to vet every candidate running for the chief executive, the Legislative Council and the election committee. It is widely seen as a move to further curb the influence of the opposition pro-democracy campaign. The wake of the widespread anti-government protests of 2019 and the electoral landslide of the 2019 District Council election, since the transfer of sovereignty over Hong Kong in 1997, the democratic movement had been calling for genuine universal suffrage for the chief executive, the Legislative Council, and the creation of the 5 new district council seats to be nominated by the district councillors and elected by popular vote. The breakthrough between the pro-democrats and the Beijing authorities did not stall the demand for the universal suffrage, instead created internal strife and fragmentations between different factions in the pro-democracy camp and the rise of localist movement which called for more confrontational approach for the movement. In the decision on the constitutional reform framework laid by the NPCSC on the 31st of August 2014 dashed the hopes of the democracy activists striving for the right to direct elections, which triggered the 79-day Occupy protests. The democratic development in Hong Kong had stagnated since then, while a new wave of independence movement was on the rise. In the 2016 New Territories East by-election, pro-independence activist Edward Leung received more than 15% of the popular vote despite his loss to the pro-democratic Civic Party's Alwan Yeung. Leung and other pro-independence activists were then barred from running in the September general election. Bajio Leung and Yo Wai Ching of Young Spiration, who was backed by Edward Leung, were successfully elected, but were soon disqualified over their oath-taking manner, with pro-democrats infighting, Occupy activists imprisoned and pro-independence movement being suppressed. The democratic movement ran out its steam. However, in the summer of 2019, Chief Executive Carrie Lam pushed for the amendment to the extradition law triggered a series of unprecedented widespread protests. The protesters soon demanded genuine universal suffrage as one of their 5 key goals. In November 2019, the pro-democrats received a historic electoral landslide in the district council election, inflicting a heavy defeat on the pro-Beijing parties by taking over more than 80% of the seats. In January 2020, Wang Jimin was removed from his post as director of the Liaison Office of the Central People's Government in Hong Kong, which was widely seen as a response to his failure to advise the central government accurately about the vulnerability of pro-Beijing candidates at the election. In June 2020, the NPCSC unilaterally imposed the sweeping Hong Kong national security law to criminalize separatism, subversion, terrorism and foreign interference, which many interpreted as a crackdown on civil liberties, government critics, and the independence movement. In July, the pro-democrats organized a territory-wide primary election to maximize their chance to obtain a majority in the upcoming Legislative Council election, despite the government warning of them potentially breaching the national security law, as some of them vowed to vote down the government budget in order to pressure the administration to respond to the demands of the protesters. Chief Executive Carrie Lam abruptly invoked the Emergency Regulations Ordinance to postpone the election, citing the recent resurgence of the COVID-19 cases. However, the decision was widely seen as the latest in a rapid series of aggressive moves by the Beijing authorities to thwart opposition momentum and neutralize the pro-democracy movement. The 55 organizers and candidates in the primary were later arrested under the national security law on the 6th of January 2021, making it the largest crackdown under the national security law since its passage. After the passage of the national security law, the Beijing authorities began to stress the importance of patriots governing Hong Kong. On 11 November 2020, the NPCSC adopted a decision which bars Legislative Council members from supporting Hong Kong independence, refusing to recognize Beijing's sovereignty over Hong Kong, seeking help from foreign countries or foreign forces to interfere in the affairs of the region, or committing other acts that endanger national security. Unseating the 4 sitting legislators. Alvin Yeung, Kwok Ka Ki, D.